Welcome to the Walled Garden Podcast. Here we nourish the gardens of our minds, one meaningful conversation at a time. If you'd like to find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Thanks for joining us. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the Walled Garden Podcast, American edition. So my wife and I officially touched down in California last Friday and absolutely loving it so far. Although we did find out on our first day here that we had both come down with a case of COVID. So we chilled out in the apartment for the appropriate amount of time. And then here we are. You know, I'm a little bit late on the podcast this week, but nonetheless, I'm excited to be here in America. To all of my American listeners, I very much look forward to finding more ways to interact with you, more ways to meet you, get to know you. And as you'll see over the coming months, there's a whole bunch of exciting opportunities that we're going to pursue in the Walled Garden in order to make that happen. Now, one of the most exciting updates that I can actually officially talk about now is that over the past few weeks, we have been working very hard to onboard some new contributors and organizational directors within the Walled Garden. And most of these people you will all actually know because they're people who I've had on the podcast before, or they're people who have been long-time supporters of the show, have been to a lot of the meetups. We've got some incredible people from all around the world who are coming together and saying, you know, this mission that we've set forth for the Walled Garden Philosophical Society is something that, A, we believe genuinely that the world needs right now, and B, it's something that we believe we can actually achieve together if we link arms and link resources and really turn this into a truly international philosophical society. And so one of the ways that we're actually introducing all of these new people in the organization to all of you is to invite you to come along to the Walled Garden Philosophical Society meetups, which are happening every single week, starting next week on the 30th of June at 3 p.m. Pacific time, California time. Now, you can find out what times that's going to be for you, wherever you are around the world, by heading to thewalledgarden.com/events. And if you go there, you're going to see all of the events that we have coming up. We've planned them all the way through to August. And every single week, we're going to be hearing from one contributor, whether it's somebody who's already been with us, whether it's Sharon or Kai or myself, or from a new contributor to the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. And I've actually set a bit of a tradition up going forward. And the tradition is going to be that every time we have a new person within the organization, I want them to run a meetup within our standard weekly meetup that is free to everybody to attend. And I want them to talk about somebody, a teacher, a mentor, a philosopher, a thinker, an author, somebody who has really disproportionately affected their life, their thinking, their philosophical inquiry. And so if you're interested, definitely go to thewalledgarden.com/events and you can see all of the events that we have coming up. As I said, the first one is going to be on the 30th of June, and I'm actually going to be running that one. I'll kick the whole series off. And I'm going to be talking about Seneca. I'm going to probably read some poetry that I've written about Seneca. I'm going to be talking about who he was, what his philosophy has taught me so far, and really how he has influenced my life more than most philosophers. And in the weeks following that, there's going to be a whole bunch of discussions around these great philosophers and thinkers and authors of history and how they can really, help us all to live extremely meaningful lives through their work. So again, I'd invite you to come along to those. If you're on our mailing list, you will get an email over the coming days with a whole list of all of these events. But if you don't want to wait for that, then just as I said, go to thewalledgarden.com/events. Now, today's episode is actually a recording of our last meetup in the Walled Garden. And the meetup was run by Sharon Lebell. And I want to announce officially on this episode that I've assigned Sharon as the official scholarch of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. And what that means is that Sharon will essentially be setting the tone for the philosophical dialogue that we'll be having within the Walled Garden. And I just think that that's such a perfect role for Sharon within our organization, which is exactly why I offered it to her and why she graciously accepted. But the reason why I think it's perfect for Sharon is because personally, I've never come across a teacher who was quite able or as able as Sharon to capture my mind, body, and soul all at once as they taught me. I really latched on to Sharon like a bit of a barnacle as soon as we met because I'd never met somebody who used their words so effectively when conveying profound messages as Sharon. And I just think it's wonderful to have Sharon alongside us in this organization and to now be able to have the opportunity to, as I said, set that tone from the top down. And with that said, I want to introduce today's lesson that you'll be listening to from Sharon because it is on holiness. And Sharon wrote the following blurb as a little bit of an introduction to the event. She wrote, "Even those who have parted ways with mainstream religion nevertheless report a yearning for experiences with the sacred and the miraculous. Do we just make holiness up, or is it something real that lives outside of us? And what does holiness impel us to do?" So with all of that, I want to introduce you again to this lesson from Sharon Lebell, our new scholarch of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society. And once again, this lesson is on holiness. Enjoy.
Let's talk about holiness. Holiness, what it is, why it might matter. I think it matters. Anyhow, so greetings, my philosophical friends, my fellow lovers of wisdom. A great day to you, great life, great moment, great opportunity, great you, great us, great togetherness. Let's begin our inquiry into holiness. How shall we do it? Oh, okay, here's how we'll do it. I'll speak for a few minutes, and then I want to open and widen our discussion. And the purpose of that will be to take a philosophical walk in the woods together. So, what might you need to put in your backpack for this shared walk? Not much. Because the main thing is, we don't want to be weighted down by such leaden things as preconceived ideas. All you need to bring with you is a willingness to listen, to see, to imagine. Just simply bring, if you would, your intense curiosity and perhaps an openness to what philosopher Martin Buber described as a posture of I and thou. We're pretty accustomed to moving through life with the perspective of what Buber called I and it, which is a kind of utilitarian frame of mind. It focuses on expedience, on the efficiency that propels us from here to there. It's oriented towards solving problems. But its shortcoming is that it views the world and other people merely as resources. Now, the I-thou stance, on the other hand, would have us, instead of using and manipulating and ever proceeding forward, it would instead point us to reverence and to depth, to recognizing the eternal and the good in the other with whom we are in relationship. We are always in relationship. So, just quickly, before we formally begin, I'm going to briefly introduce myself in case any of our listeners may not know me. I'm Sharon Lebell. I've been writing and speaking about philosophical topics for several decades now. And I'm probably best known for writing the international bestseller, The Art of Living, the classical manual on virtue, happiness, and effectiveness, which is a modern interpretation of the philosophy of the great Stoic sage Epictetus. Now, I wrote that book with the idea that people who don't normally gravitate toward philosophy might partake of some of Stoic philosophy's riches. But most importantly, the book is meant to be an invitation to readers to go seek primary philosophical texts, the origin texts. I've written a few other books too, one of which I'll mention later on. And I'm also a composer and performing musician on a one-of-a-kind instrument I had made for me. It has 106 strings, and it's a kind of supersized 5-octave, fully chromatic hammered dulcimer. I was originally drawn to this instrument because the only way I know how to describe its sound is that it sounds holy. So, to set us up and help us to fully focus on the subject at hand, I'm going to play a tune I started writing about 10 years ago, and it's unfinished. And I have a hunch, though I don't want to jinx it, that I may end up finishing it today. We'll see. It doesn't matter. A decade ago, when the tune first made its appearance to me, I immediately knew what its title would be, though I can't explain how this title, it kind of insisted its way into my mind. What is the title? It's Kedoshim, which happens to mean holy ones in Hebrew. The idea of Kedoshim also points to what is known as the Holiness Code in the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament, which sets forth the behaviors that make people holy, things like, not worshiping idols, not stealing, the importance of paying workers a fair wage. And this conception of holiness is fascinating to me because of its legalistic spirit and the idea that virtuous behavior is part and parcel of holiness. So I'm going to play just the unfinished snippet of this tune that seeks its completion. Here we go. Let's see if we can. There we are. There it is. Okay, a little fragment. I know these little earbud things are not the ideal sound system, but there we have it. Kedoshim. Okay, so let's set two ground rules or guiding principles to establish the spirit of today's exploration. I want to invite each of us to, for the time that we're together here, to suspend any of our identifications with or allegiances to particular philosophical schools or other codified points of view. And also for the nonce, let's put aside our curated selves, our polished for public consumption presentational selves. Because by doing this, I believe we will best allow ourselves to enter the current of shared philosophizing, of actively loving wisdom. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to put on the shelf. I'm a mouthpiece for Stoicism. I'm an observant Jew. I practice Buddhism. I was married to a Jesuit, and then I got married to an Irish Catholic. And, well, you could say, well, that just means you're from California. But anyway, all to say that that's all going to be on the shelf for me. And I hope that you will put whatever your counterpart is to those kinds of affiliations. Because this time together is meant to be a heuristic venture. We are here, each of us, to, with open minds and open hearts, be changed and to be enlarged for the better for having shared this time with one another. What we're here for is to suppose, not to conclusively figure out. We're here to suppose as philosophical friends together. So let's take that philosophical walk together and hold this wiggly, multi-layered idea of holiness, a term, an expression that seldom arises within the nomenclature of academic philosophy, to be sure. And I think that's why I'm personally drawn to the idea, because it pushes at the edges of the philosophical enterprise. Holiness is usually found within the literature, the language, and experience of religion. Why is that? Well, let's hold that question. This meetup is a bit of a self-indulgence for me. I need you. I need each of you to come on this journey of suppose with me, because I have a thing about holiness. It's an itch. It's a yearning. It comes from the idea of knowing that the extraordinary is always locked up inside the ordinary, but it can easily be liberated by a shift in seeing, by appreciation, by giving, by making, by trying, by caring, by full engagement. So here are some further ideas for you to hold, but not necessarily for you to try to answer just yet. Let's live these questions together. What is the idea of the holy? What might holiness be for? Is it only the province of religion? Is it owned by those who believe in or relate to an idea of God only? Or can holiness be understood or experienced outside of religious observance or practice? Is holiness a transformation? Can holiness be encountered, let's say, through taking psychedelics? And if it were encountered thus, would this be legit holiness, or would it be just a mirage, a kind of trick of the mind? Should we care about holiness? Does it matter? And if so, why and to whom? Why might we even need holiness? Why might we need it? Could holiness simply be the realization that what we think of as the ordinary is actually miraculous if we were to see it differently? Well, in anticipation of this meetup, I talked to a few of what you might call holiness experts. I talked to a priest, a Christian brother, a Buddhist, a Protestant minister, a rabbi, and some academics in the field of comparative religion. Well, every description or definition I heard about the idea of holiness seemed to fall into one of two categories: the objective and the subjective. What I'm calling the objective descriptions of holiness were those that regarded holiness as meaning exceptionally good, fulfilling all the virtues, as in a so-called holy person. This idea of the holy is one of moral perfection. I'm put in mind of the canonization of saints in the Catholic tradition, for example. The other way, the subjective way I heard holiness described, was as a transcendent or mystical encounter with the divine, something that happens within a person's emotional spaces, the mysterious tremendum, a kind of consuming awe that changes a person forever. Well, it's here that we have to pay homage to Rudolf Otto, the German philosopher and Lutheran theologian who wrote the seminal book, The Idea of the Holy, which was published in 1917. Otto was a zealous student of comparative religion. He believed that holiness did indeed embrace moral perfection, but perhaps even more importantly, he thought the defining element of the holy was what he called the numinous, the non-rational, non-sensory experience or feeling whose primary and immediate object is outside the self. Outside the self. This mental state is the incomparable condition where the human being finds him or herself utterly, what he called, abashed. Or we might say completely transformed by awe. This term he coined, the numinous, which comes from the Latin numen, it means the power or presence or realization of a spiritual dimension, of the presence or realization of divinity. Okay, a story. Many years ago, I lived for an extended time at a monastery run by Belgian Cistercian nuns. And I went to stay there because I was working on this book right here, The Music of Silence, with a Benedictine monk named Brother David Steindl-Rast. The book, The Music of Silence, highlights the elements of monasticism that can be fruitfully applied in the lives of regular, of us worldly people. Anyhow, living at the monastery for me was an extraordinary experience. First of all, silence was observed at all times, except when it was absolutely necessary to speak. And this was meant, as you might guess, to facilitate contemplation as we did our jobs. And it was meant to deepen mindfulness, for example, as we ate our meals, went about our business throughout the day. Well, at this monastery, everything was simplicity itself. The room I stayed in had nothing but a bed, a desk, a light. It had a chair. That was it. And these beautiful nuns grew and harvested their own food. One of the things I remember the most was alongside the simplicity, there was also a great sense of order. Each day was divided into the 8 canonical hours. There was vigils, the night watch, lauds, the coming of the light, prime, deliberate beginning, terce, blessing, sext, fervor and commitment, non, the shadows grow longer, vespers, lighting the lamps, compline, completing the circle, over and over again each day. At the start of each of these sacred hours, we would put down our work and silently go to the chapel to hear Gregorian chant. And the only way I could describe it is it was like a kind of punctuation in time as we advanced through what you might call the seasons of the day. Now the light is this way, so it's time to do this. Now the light has turned that way, the shadows are long, so it's time to do that. And so we began each of the hours in this way. Just a brief coming together to hear or to chant this music, and then we would pivot back to our labors until it was time to once again stop and to listen and to heed the message of this moment. Every moment of the day was an opportunity to realize the blessing of aliveness. And this blessing of aliveness expressed itself in humble, very down-to-earth ways of service and mostly taking care of details, a lot of details to pay attention to. Anyhow, the message of the daily rhythms of the monastery was to live responsibly, to live intentionally, to direct our lives from within, as opposed to being swept along by the demands of the clock, by external demands, by mere reactions to whatever happens. In that setting, life speaks, and we could hear it if we listened. Same as in our workaday lives, right? Well, I did not then, and I do not wish now to live monastically. But what I can tell you is I will never forget that formative time. This formative time how do I say it? It just kind of nonchalantly revealed the persistent, quiet ecstasy that underpins all of our lives, all of our moments. It's there. I saw it. I saw it. I felt it. I didn't have to believe in anything. I didn't have to worship anything. And I didn't have to change who I was. But I saw it. I felt it. And all I had to do was shut up and pay attention. I know that what I was experiencing there was holiness. I don't know what else. I don't know what else to call it. And it forever left me awestruck at the very fact of existence and the blessing, again, for lack of a better word, that we have been assigned a seat in the theater of life and many roles on life's stages to experience the extraordinary ordinary. This I know, however ineffable, is not only good, but absolutely necessary for our understanding of ourselves as human beings encountering the unfathomable mystery of which we are a part. Some of you may not like the name, or rather the word holiness. Maybe it conjures up old organized religion wounds or something. But I don't have a better synonym. And all I know is that holiness, the raw experience of it, the seeking of it, the practice of ritual to woo it, to draw it close, well, it's perhaps the main thing that imparts dignity to the human spirit. And I think we tacitly understand this. Holiness, or its possibility, gives ennobling hope. It's a kind of promise that we're not just hapless bags of meat hurling through space, reproducing, making a fuss over our apparent successes and failures, and then dying and eventually, in the fullness of time, being forgotten. Holiness says, keep looking. There is more than meets the eye. And I betcha it's good. Anyhow, I'm going to throw a few more bars of Kedoshim at you, and then we can open the discussion. Just a moment. What do I do with my sticks? Here they are.
Hey friends, thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Walled Garden podcast. Now, don't forget that if you go to thewalledgarden.com/events, you can find all of the events that we have coming up in the next few weeks. We've got events booked right up until mid to late August, and all of these events are going to be based around the theme of really introducing our new contributors and directors within the Walled Garden to all of you, but also having them talk about these incredible philosophers, thinkers, writers, people who have really influenced their life and their thinking and their philosophical inquiry. So this is going to be an exciting few weeks. It's going to be a beautiful few weeks. We'd love to see you there. All of these events are free and they're happening every single Thursday at 3 p.m. Pacific time. That's California time. So we'd love to see you there. As I said, go to thewalledgarden.com/events. And hey, we'll see you soon. You've been listening to the Walled Garden podcast. If you'd like to attend any of our free meetups and events, or if you'd like to get one-on-one mentoring with either Sharon Lebell, Kai Whiting, or myself, just go to thewalledgarden.com. But for now, don't forget to nourish those gardens in your mind.